everyone. Welcome to the first official Belegarth Peerage podcast, The Round Table. This is Sir Rem with Sir Par.
Hello, everybody.
And we're going to talk about Peerage today in a lot of different aspects, in a lot of different forms and histories, but we're just going to kind of go around what we believe Peerage means, what it means for sports like us, and what it means for Belegarth in and of itself. So, yeah, we'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, so I think the first thing when we're talking about Peerage in any kind of quote-unquote reenactment game, or for today's purposes and what we'd like to set the precedents for in future Peerage talks, we're talking about LARPs. So I'd like to start by apologizing to everyone out there who's listening who doesn't think that the SCA, Dagger Here, and Belegarth are live-action roleplay games, because first of all, I'm sorry to inform you that you're incorrect. But for our purposes today, that's what we're going to talk about, because it's not a unique phenomena to Dag or Bell that Peerage exists. They exist in most medieval or fantasy medieval set live-action roleplay games, and they certainly exist in the SCA, who is kind of the progenitor, the granddaddy of all LARPs, if you will.
Very
and
much
it's
so.
Also where a lot of foam games get their ideas about Peerage. Historically, they come from interactions with the SCA. So we'll start there and say we're going to talk about LARPs today. And that includes all of us. For those of you who maybe are coming from a different foam game to this Peerage Council, or this, not Peerage Council, Peerage Podcast, so Rem and I are both knights in Belegarth. I was knighted in 2008 by Sir Thanos. Rem was knighted in 2016 by Sir Kagan. And so we come to our understandings of Peerage through Belegarth. Belegarth, especially in the West, we both live in Idaho, has a really heavy Western SCA influence in how we approach Peerage. So it's important to note that too, so that you guys are like, these guys are way off base, so that you know where our approach comes from.
Correct. Yeah, we are representing a very regional representation of our idea of Peerage based on all the influences that come from our specific area.
Yeah, and our hope is, for those of you that are listening, if you're involved in some way in a Peerage, in a foam game, or even the SCA, and you're coming to this podcast, our hope is that you will eventually become a contributor, and that you bring your own unique perspectives to whatever topic you might want to address. But we thought it important for episode 1, as people are going to come to this podcast, hopefully starting at the beginning, to kind of give a little bit of a history and kind of a why Peerage and what it looks like today in not just our game, but games that are like ours.
Yeah, correct. The whole point of this podcast is to open up that wonderful communication, dialogue from different aspects, different communities, different viewpoints, and anyone can really join in and have a topic of interest and bring that to the forefront in our community.
Right. And wherever this is posted, I don't know where we're going to host it yet. Maybe it's YouTube, maybe it's iTunes or whatever. We'll have information on how, if you're interested in recording an episode, how to do that.
Correct.
So let's go ahead and start with a brief history of Peerage in roleplay games. When the SCA was founded, from their very first meeting in California, in Berkeley, California, they already had an idea that they want to include nobility and knighthood in their games. From their very first meeting, and there were some pretty famous people at that first meeting, including author Marion Zimmer Bradley, and there's descriptions of that very first meeting in California. But they had this idea that everybody who was there aren't peasants in the SCA, and that everybody who came to the SCA had a form of nobility. And so that the very first idea of knights and nobles in a LARP game came from that very first SCA meeting. So it's been endemic of the pseudo-reenactment groups from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Peerage comes into foam games in 1985 when the first Dagger Here Knight is made. Shortly after that, possibly shortly before, I can't remember which came first, but Amtgard is founded. Amtgard is unique in the Big Four, and for our purposes, when we talk about the Big Four LARPs or foam games, they're Dagger Here, which is the kind of granddaddy of them, Amtgard, which to my knowledge has the largest population, Belegarth, which is primarily Western, and then Darkon. And Darkon gets big, obviously, because they had that really well done, even if it's not completely representative of their game, documentary.
Yeah. As an aside, that's what got me into the sport, was that documentary.
The Darkon documentary.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the Big Four, we also know that LARPing internationally, so obviously coming from Idaho, we're part of the United States, we know that LARPing internationally, Bicoline in Canada, Conquest of Maedicea in Europe. Both of those organizations also have a heavy focus on nobility and peerage. So their peerage has been a part of foam games and LARPs since almost when they've been started. It wasn't even a full 10 years in Dagger here before the first Knight got made, which came out of Danville, Illinois, Middle-earth, when Arion Windwalker knighted Sir Geoffrey, also known as Beowulf the Dreamer. For foam games, that's where knighthood comes from. That's our lineage, specifically my lineage. Also, Geoffrey knighted White Tiger, who knighted Sir Thanos, who knighted me. So I was born in 1985, and I'm also only 3 generations as a knight removed from the first knight that was made in 1985. So knights have been a part of foam games as long as I've been alive, because I was born in September, and I believe the first knighting took place in June. So knights are like 3 months older than I am as far as foam games go.
Oh, so close.
Yeah, almost beat it. So I know a lot of Daggerhear folks, when they hear that kind of lineage rattled off and they talk about Arion Windwalker, a lot of Daggerhear folks are split on Arion. They don't really some of them don't find him to be important to knighthood because he was just the king. It was really Geoffrey who kind of brought knighthood to us. I think it's important, though, when we talk about lineage, if you're going to talk about it historically, to mention Arion and talk about his importance, because without a king, without a rightful king, quote-unquote, a rightful king of Middle-earth, we wouldn't have had a knighting. I'm a history professor at Boise State University. I have a Master's of Arts in Medieval History. My research was all on the origins and elevation of knighthood. And so I have a really strong historical perspective on how knights came to be. If you want to read my thesis, you can. It's like 119 pages long. Some of it's kind of boring, but it has a really fascinating discussion on language. But to save you all of that, if it weren't for nobility trying to kind of recognize and include the best fighters, then knights wouldn't have kind of the appeal they do today. We still wouldn't be kind of watching Kingdom of Heaven or have a fascination with Game of Thrones, those kind of things. They come from a fascination with knighthood, and that comes from nobles recognizing talent, combat talent. Mm-hmm. That's also where Peerage originates in our foam game, is a recognition of combat talent. And that's where the first SCA knights came from, too. Eventually, the SCA... Well, and it's important to note that the SCA, while it has 4 branches of peerage, only one of them, and those are what we would kind of colloquially refer to as sword knights, the combat knights.
Right.
Only that group is referred to as Sir. They have the designation that's Sir. Their other peers are called Master or Mistress. Or,
different titles.
Yeah, different titles, but they all have the same kind of level of recognition of excellence. For foam games... I don't know if when the first knight was made in DAG, if that SCA system wasn't fully developed or what happened. But in foam games, especially the Big Four, this might be different in some of the other LARPs that have popped up across the country that are kind of less popular. And not to say that they're less liked, but they don't have the population.
Right.
Less populist might be a better way to say it then. Mm-hmm. We only had knights. DAG only had knights. And to my knowledge... as a organization, still only recognizes peers being sirs. Whether or not they're combat focused, or how they get their knighthood, or whether or not they go through the traditional squireship system, that's what they have. Darkon and Amtgard both have peerage built into their rules, which Daggerhear and Belegarth do not. It's a cultural phenomena.
Yeah. Right.
Amtgard has a system like the SCA where you have 4 different ways you can become recognized. The big difference is that Amtgard calls all of their groups sirs. You could be a sword knight or a crown knight, or I think it's a serpent knight, and I forget the other one. All the members of that peerage who are out there, I'm sorry, I love Amtgard, I just don't have an opportunity to play it.
No matter the peerage, their title remains the same.
Sir, and they are knights. Mm-hmm. Recently, Belegarth has kind of focused on... we've added new peers, and this is really where Rem and I are coming to this idea of peerage from, is there are knights in Belegarth, and they are made by other knights. They can be made by realms. There's no rules. So if you're coming to this podcast from Darkon or Amtgard or even DAG, and you don't know about Bell Knightings, here you go.
It's a good rundown.
For the most part, Bell Knights are created by other Bell Knights. There are exceptions. Sometimes a realm is free to, especially if they're not near any other knights, they do have the ability to make knights, although if you're going to go that route, I highly recommend that you get in contact with the closest knights to you. They'll have more experience and kind of an idea of what qualifications a knight should have before you make that move. But that's where it is. And it's a community practice as opposed to being something tied into the rules, like in Amtgard. Amtgard, I'm actually a little bit, as a Bell fighter, jealous of Amtgard's not only adoption, but also focus from a rules standpoint on how they recognize peers. There's a certain number of things you have to be able to do to earn any level of peerage in any kind of version. And then you also have to have the approval of your local knights,
right?
Which I'm jealous of. Belegarth did not jump on the Knights in the Rules train the way I kind of wish they'd had. And so now we have as many different knights as that exist in our system are how many different ways you can get knighted and how many different expectations you might have for coming up.
Yeah, there is no foundational standard of expecting someone who's a squire to become a knight.
Yeah.
There's no list. There's no necessary community standard as well. It is totally up to the knight that the squire is adhering to and their personal expectations. And I would argue also community, in involvement in recognizing that person being a knight as well. But generally, there's nothing there.
Yeah, to echo that, the difference then, and maybe where this is where Bell and Dagger here are a little more pure than Amtgard, is that our titles are meaningless outside of the community. Where Amtgard, there's a set number of rules, and a knight from Desert Winds could go to any other... you go to any other Amtgard community, and if you've attained a certain standard, there's an expectation based on the rules of Amtgard of what you can do. On the other hand, if a knight from Wrath, which is our Belegarth's chapter name, went to, say, Middle-earth, which is a DAG chapter in Danville or the nearby Numenor for Belegarth, the expectations of what we'd be able to do might be very different. And so, because of that, it's not the game that's regulating our knighthoods, it's the people around us. And so... if I were to show up at an event and go, I'm a knight, and the community thought I was a bastard for just a jerk, they might go, no, you're not, and because we don't believe in your knighthood. So it does require knights and other peers in Belegarth to go a little more out of their way to continually reinforce that they have not just earned it, but they continue to deserve their title. There are plenty of examples of people who get knighted and retire, or people who have earned a title and have turned into a different person. It predates Rem's knighthood, but that happened here in Idaho. Someone got their title and then turned into a different person, and it was subsequently removed from them.
Yeah.
So where Amtgard has this kind of rule set, and I'm a little bit jealous of that level of expectation.
Right.
Belegarth has a community enforcement angle, and Amtgard has that too. You can have your knighthood removed in Amtgard if you prove unworthy of it. It's a little bit harder because of that community standard. But for Belegarth and Dagger here, you have to continue to earn your title, and so both systems have flaws, and there are parts that I like about both of them, but that's where we're at with a game where the community standard is important.
Right.
Belegarth also, knowing that the community standards will change, and knowing that individual standards for knighthood change. For instance, for the longest time in Belegarth, it was an unspoken rule that if you were a knight, you could fight. That you had some level of fighting skill, and that you could do something unique that your other fellows couldn't do. Even if you were terrible at sword and shield, you might be a really top-notch archer, or you might be the best spearman in the last 5 years, and so something about your combat ability got you recognized. That has changed, and the opinions on whether or not that change is good are as varied as there are knights. But what Belegarth went out of its way to do, and I was a part of this process, was create a specific peerage for non-combatants. In the same vein that Amtgard has a service knight, or a leadership knight, we wanted to create something that didn't carry the same title in the tradition of the SCA. So we're kind of marrying SCA and Amtgard in these respects. But we wanted to make sure that individuals who maybe didn't have fighting skill or couldn't fight because of their medical restrictions or weren't interested in the combat had an opportunity to be recognized for their diligent work, their leadership in the community, their presence, their...
and they're technically their own prowess as well.
Yeah.
Even though it's not combat prowess, it's their own prowess.
Yeah, prowess, for those of you who are like, prowess, I haven't heard that before, is one of the virtues for the Knights of the Highlands. We believe that you have to show some combat prowess to be a Knight of the Highlands. which is an order of knighthood. That doesn't mean a knight at all. That means to join our specific order of knighthood. But Rem's right that all guild masters, which is where I'm getting, we being a community of individuals who were already peers, and a group of people who wanted to become peers who didn't fight, most notably among them Anij from Stygia, which is in Montana, and Master Lady Armstrong from Numenor. She's also heavily involved in the Amtgard crowd, so that if your name sounds familiar, that's why. Those two individuals kind of spearheaded the push towards creating this new form of peerage for Belegarth, even though this form of peerage existed in other games before us. And so initially two guilds were formed. The Artificers Guild, which is all around crafting. Both Anij and Lady Armstrong are masters of that guild. They are focused on, for those two, they're garbers. They're master garbers. But you have to have a primary craft, which you have to be really, really good at. It's, in all reality, you have to be a better tailor or seamstress in the Artificers Guild than you do a sword fighter to be a knight.
Yeah, and in that they get the benefit of that hindsight, because when they built the guilds, they actually created this foundational structure saying you must meet some expectations of being considered a master. Whereas our traditional knighthood in Belegarth, it's up to the individual. The guilds have an overarching what would you call it?
They have a council.
A council, yeah, correct. They have a council, and you have to put forth a portfolio of your work. Yeah,
and it's not a single. Some knights, not very many of them, can get knighted for doing a single thing. Say a big thing. Say organizing and running a week-long event like Chaos Wars or Ragnarok. That's not the case for the guilds. They have to put together, like Rem said, a whole suite of work, a portfolio. And then on top of that, especially if they're artificers, they have to craft their own, and this is for the most part an expectation of knights as well. They have to craft their own heraldic garb, their own heraldic devices. So they have to. We were lucky enough to witness Master Anij's elevation at Chaos Wars. And she had to completely make her garb set from the top up, and it was really, really well done.
Really well done.
And so the other guild that exists in Belegarth that's fully formed and fully functional is the Seneschal's Guild. The Seneschal's Guild is focused specifically on event running, realm running, recruitment, those kind of ephemeral aspects of sword fighting that don't have anything tangible associated with them. So where the artificers are making garb, making weapons, making armor, chairs and banners, crafts, any craft.
Really good tangible crafts.
The Seneschals are doing things like creating and running new events, starting realms, running leadership classes. They're doing all these things, fundraising. They're doing these big things that don't have anything tangible that you can touch. And there are very few Master Seneschals. There are very few guild masters in Belegarth, period. Most of them have come from the Artificers Guild because they're far easier to judge. To my knowledge, as this is being recorded, there is only 2 or 3 Master Seneschals. And with one more either having just been recognized or about to be recognized, and I won't spoil that for you here. Both of these guilds have Facebook pages, so if you're interested in what you're doing, you can search Belegarth, either Seneschal or Artificer Guild, and get involved with what's going on.
This is our plug. Go to the guild pages.
Go to the guild pages. And the third guild has very recently been formed. It is the Chroniclers Guild. The Chroniclers Guild kind of took some of the members of the Artificers Guild. The other 2 guilds were running for 2 years and building up before the idea for Chroniclers became a thing. The Chroniclers are people who keep history, write lore, take pictures, make videos, and so folks like Crinoline, who has been taking Belegarth photos, really high end Belegarth photos for years. Folks like Archive, who and Coop, who make really excellent sword fighting videos. It's those kind of folks who are all together, along with Sir Roku from Stygia and myself, who are historians. And I'm working on. There are no Chronicler Masters yet. None of us have been around long enough. Yeah. We're still forming the ideas for the guild, but I can tell you that my project to receive my Chronicler Mastership eventually will be an in-character history of the lineage of knights in for the Knights of the Highlands.
That'd be great.
So that's kind of to give the audience an idea of what the Chroniclers Guild might do.
Yeah. And it's still relatively new. Been established for about a month, like roughly, right?
So we've been doing behind the scenes stuff for like 9 months, and we officially got announced about a month and a half ago.
Okay, good, good.
So
yeah, so if that's something up your alley, like that's something to look into as well.
Yeah, you can find that guild page also by searching Belegarth Chroniclers Guild, and then the guilds themselves have an additional hierarchy, an additional overarching structure. There is an all guild council who deals with guild, but made up of masters from each guild, or will be when they're Chronicler masters, and they kind of are the deciders and movers and shakers for directing the guild as a whole.
Yeah, there's this really strong network that essentially the guilds set up when they were placed, or they were created in the first place, saying, you know, we want standards, we want expectations, we also want a support system.
Yeah.
Great example is you can be a mentor for these guilds, which essentially means you have experience in whatever they're doing. So artificers, crafting, you know, seneschal service, and you can actually set up and help people who are on their path to become a master by becoming a mentor.
Ideally, obviously, these were things that were created out of nothing.
Right.
And so initially, the mentors, the guild mentors, were all people who had attained some level of peerage and had an expertise in whatever we were doing, until the masters were established. Now, once there are enough masters, that role will be taken on exclusively by people who have a mastership in the guild, and will function a lot like a knight-squire relationship.
Right.
And initially, a lot of the mentors for the seneschal or the artificers guild were knights, almost exclusively. Now, I'm very proud to say we have not nearly as many as we should, and the guilds keep getting stronger. This year's official Belegarth hashtag is #BuildTheGuilds.
Build the guilds.
Build the guilds. Going forward, obviously we want to see people follow those paths and really get into and hone their crafts and improve themselves and really dig into it. But we have almost enough artificer masters where the apprentices are matched up with someone who's actually obtained a mastership rather than an outside mentor. The seneschals have a ways to go for that. We just need more masters. We need people who, if you're out there and you've done event running or event service or started a realm and you're not a part of the guilds and you want to be, get on Facebook, get in touch with them. They need you as much as you need them.
#Build the guilds.
#Build the guilds. So there we are as far as a history goes. The next question that I think Rem and I would like to introduce and deal with is not just why did Peerage show up, but why is it important now? We'll both freely admit that for a while, in all 4 games, and the SCA, so in all 5 big games, Peerage was a way to set people apart. It was a method. It was a method by which people were otherized, and initially that wasn't anyone's goal. It was a goal to be a system of recognition.
Right.
But it has, for a time, been a way for people to set themselves above other people, and particularly Western Belegarth Knights and other members of our peerages, so the new guilds were involved in this, realized that was happening, and not in any small part due to Sir Rem here. He was, I believe you're still a squire at the time.
I was
right?
still a squire.
Got really bummed out at people talking about how shitty knights were, and wanted to make sure that his good name wasn't tarnished.
Oh my! I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, in addition to make sure that peers were understood and also still had a relevant function. Because if the system is broken, there's no reason to keep it.
Right.
If the system only exists to put Rem and I over the non-peer Belegarth person, then the system's broken.
Yeah, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. There are lots of ways that it could be fixed. And so, in order to do that, Rem hosted the very first Peerage Council for the West at a Chaos Wars. And it was a big meeting, and Rem basically got in front of people, still wearing white. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with that system for knighthood, squires wear a white tabard. There's a lot of reasons they do it, but it definitely sets them apart from other people. And it, in particular, at a gathering of knights and squires, definitely sets you up to be an inferior.
Long and short of it.
If nothing else, if nothing else, just in the hierarchy of things. But it definitely otherizes you just by wearing it. Now, there's lots of good reasons to wear a white tabard, which we can get into at another podcast. But so Rem's standing in front of a bunch of people, many of whom have already attained a title he was seeking to attain. A lot of them were in an exclusive club that he was hoping to join, and basically said, this club has a shitty reputation, how do we fix it? And for a lot of us, I remember being at that council, and I remember like, wow, I've had this thought before, but I've never thought to say it out loud. And so for 4 years now? Yeah, for 4 years now, at every Chaos Wars and most other big Western events, the peers all get together and we have a self-check-in. A reflective moment. How are we doing? What's going on? How can we be better? And ultimately, out of that was a reality check for the peers that were present. It certainly impacted me and my attitude towards people. I've always been willing to teach. I've always been willing to help. But it kind of gave me a wake up call in like the way that you're helping isn't necessarily healthy for the people you're trying to help. And that's been a movement here. There have been attempts to take it out east. I know that a Peerage Council was slated to happen at Oktoberfest. I know guild meetings happen at Midwestern and Eastern events that are at Belegarth level, but I don't know that a full Peerage Council has happened yet. It's in reaction to those council meetings that this podcast was started.
Very much so, yeah. Yeah. Part tells a really good tale of it, for sure. So I thank him for that. But a big part of the reasoning for A, this podcast, and B, the Peerage Council is exactly the reasoning of why we're peers. Why are we peers?
Yeah.
It's a great thing to pursue when you're in the sport. Like, it gives you drive, it gives you purpose. Those things are great. But what happens after that? What happens when you get the chain, the belt?
Yeah.
What happens when you get the title? And I realized, as a squire, and as I had the wonderful support of Sir Parr, my knight Sir Kagan, Sir Ravin, Sir Oroku, all of the other peers, Sir Shurl, all around me, showing me what could be more, what could be done, beyond just being proficient with a spear, okay with sword and board. What do we do for this community? And there was a lot of individual knights that were sitting there going, I have ideas, I have initiatives, I have projects that will raise the community higher. And then we have the other knights that were saying, I have a chain.
Yeah. And it's also important historically to mention that at that first meeting were some of the first guild apprentices.
Yeah.
At that time, if I'm remembering correctly, and I'm pretty sure I am, there were no guild masters, only guild apprentices. Since then, as I've mentioned, lots of masters have been elevated. But it was a group of people that were saying, like, we're trying to change things. We want to make things better. How do we do it? And it can't be, and this is true for every game, whether it's the SCA or Amtgard or Daggerhere or Darkon or Dystopia Rising, which is a post-apocalyptic LARP, whatever. If you have a set of recognition, of elevation, of peerage, whatever you call it, it has to be a group effort if you're gonna improve it. Because I could do all the good works I want, and I could be the nicest guy in the world, which, if you've never met me, I'm not. But I could be, and it wouldn't matter if the guy next to me who's wearing the same vestments, who has the same title, is a total D-bag. And so that was the first moment, to my knowledge, and again, I'm a historian, so it's what I do. In any foam game, that's the first time, in my knowledge, that a group of people went, what? And how do we fix it? Amtgard, their history is a bit different because, again, their knighthood is built into their rules.
Right.
And so they kind of collectively at the beginning said, we want to do this. It actually affects their gameplay. There are Amtgard classes you can't play if you're not a knight. The paladin is, I'm pretty sure, and the anti-paladin are the two of them.
That makes sense.
There's garb you can't wear and belts you can't wear in Amtgard. And then, of course, also in the SCA, if you don't have a title, it's not built into Bell or Dag's rules. And so Amtgard kind of went at the beginning, we're going to do this. And luckily for them, they can change their rules. They have a really good system for changing and updating their rules. Not the rest of the games, maybe not so much, but they did it intentionally and up front.
Right.
And so, but I don't know, to my knowledge, I don't know. I've never been to a Circle of Knights meeting for any of the kingdoms. I would love to go. Someone invite me to one. I'll come listen. And just hear, like, are they having the same conversations we're having in Belegarth?
Right.
Is Dag now having the same conversations we're having? Whether it's orders of knights or realms that have knights associated with them, are groups of people now sitting down and going, what do our titles mean? Have they degraded? How can we fix them? Because that conversation is happening in Belegarth, and that conversation happens every couple of months in Belegarth, especially in the West. At the time this is being recorded, we are 3 days away from our season opener for the Highlands of Chaos, which is Idaho and northern Utah and Montana. Gets folded into that a little bit as well, whether they want to be or not.
Sorry, Montana.
Yeah, sorry, Montana. It's cold out there all by yourselves up in the frozen north, so come to where it's not cold. At the time this is being recorded, we're about to have that conversation for the first time in 2019. We have it at every opener. We have it at every Chaos Wars. We try to have it at every Battle for Tudorgvald. Doesn't always happen because that event is a big hangout.
Right. Also, it's on the tail end of the season.
It is. It's at the end of the season. So the opener conversation is, all right, how do we do last year? What do we got going this year? And then, of course, Chaos Wars being the flagship event for the Northwest is a really big meeting, and it draws people from East and West. And those Peerage Councils are the largest ones I've seen. They certainly dwarf the opener ones.
Oh yeah, for sure. Chaos Wars is our flagship for sure, and if it ever goes out east, I'd be more than thrilled.
Yeah. So coming back to that, those conversations are happening, and so the question that all peers have to ask themselves, whether they're an SCA Heavy Knight or an Order of the Pelican, or they're an Amtgard Sword Knight, or a Crown Knight, whether they're a Knight in Belegarth or Dagorhir, or they're a Knight in Darkon. Or a guild member. All peers need to ask themselves, what does my title mean in the context of my game? And if it means less than it used to, then it's up to all of us to help get each other back on track, which is where this podcast comes in. It's where the peerage councils have been coming in. It's where the guilds came from. It's how do we make these things better? Now, what that means for the game going forward, and what you can expect to hear on this podcast, and what you can expect to see at least Western Belegarth events. That's all Rem and I will promise.
Yeah, that's all we can promise.
Yeah, we'd like it to be other places. We're hoping that you'll see things. But what that means for you, the listener, is that your peers, and when we say peers, that's the other thing that's weird. Even the word peer kind of otherizes people, because those with titles do not, the very word itself historically sets you aside from people that don't. And that's why we chose the word peerage instead of knights, because it expands the realm of who's got a title. And for Belegarth, that could mean War Masters, guild members. Actually, War Masters have been relatively devoid of our discussion in this podcast. That's our fault.
Sorry, War Masters.
Sorry, War Masters.
We didn't mean it.
For those of you who are unfamiliar with the War Master line, for the longest time in Belegarth, and this is, again, different from heavier LARPs, more characterization LARPs, and certainly different from the SCA, where they don't allow fantasy personas. Belegarth has a kind of come-as-you-are, fantasy if you want, policy towards characterization.
Very much so.
And there are a large number of people in our game who very wonderfully and effectively portray monstrous races, a la Lord of the Rings or Dungeons & Dragons. And for the longest time, the only kind of even close to peerage title the monsters had, quote-unquote the monsters had, were Makoots from Horde. Now, Makoots, initially, they started that to recognize, and Gorlock or Darvax, if you're listening and I'm wrong, please do your own podcast on Makootage, because we'd love that.
Yeah,
I'd listen to that episode.
Yeah, correct us. That'd be great.
But as far as I understand, they kind of started Horde in general as a reaction to kind of knights who were too full of themselves.
Right.
And the Makoots kind of were like, well, we can't have that, but we're going to do something better. It's like Bender saying we're going to start our own whatever with hookers and blackjack.
Yeah, very similar.
Yeah, and so the Makoots for the longest time were the only title a monster could attain, but it was still unit specific. So the knights around them, whether the Makoots wanted it or not, the knights that were friends with them and around them started to see them as the monster knights, quote unquote. And I do not, this is my caveat, I do not mean that to say that Makoots are monster knights. They are very different, But the knights who were coming at that from their own perspective saw something that was similar and went, "That's like what I do."
Yeah.
And so you're me,
of course,
but with red face paint on, Darbacks. And so for the longest time, that was the only level of recognition a monster could attain that had anything to do with peerage. And so Makoots were kind of folded in against. I'm going to guess against their will to the idea of peerages.
Yes.
War Masters are not that. They are intentionally peers. Makoots have been seen as peers for so long, I don't know that they can get away from it. I think they're stuck with us.
Yeah, I definitely remember inviting the Makoots to the Peerage Council and then being told directly that they're not peers. But I was like, okay, cool, you're invited anyway because everyone's invited.
And then they came.
And then they showed up.
So, at least some of them came. And so, the community sees them that way, even if they don't see themselves that way, I guess is the best way to put it. War Masters are intentionally a member of Peerage, but they are open to any monster. It's not Horde specific. So if you're a monster and you're not in Horde and you want some recognition, find your local War Master. They're great, and most of them won't try to eat you. So War Masters are explicitly monster peers, and the way that it was described to me by my very good friend War Master Hakan is that they are monsters on the field, so they're not restricted by any of the kind of chivalric code that knights try to. And I say try. Tournaments are hands off, but on the field, knights try to treat each other chivalrically.
Right.
But monsters on the field and knights off the field. They're volunteers. They're first to help. They teach classes. They do all the kind of hallmark things that peers do. And so they're intentionally members of the peerage group. And then, of course, the guild councils are all
peers as well. Yeah.
So Western Belegarth, what that means for you is that members of those groups, and maybe the Makoots, I don't know, maybe they'll try to eat you, are looking to serve you in a better way and to make their titles relevant.
Right.
We've been doing it for the last 4 years. I personally have seen huge growth, even among people who've been knighted for 10 years, and a renewed interest in getting the message out about what we are. When we were at that first Peerage Council, a lot of what, at least from our perspective, the problem is people didn't know exactly what we were for. They thought we were just, and this is a term I'm going to use, so Rem can't edit it out later. They thought we were just a big circle jerk.
I would agree with that.
For our own importance.
Yeah.
And while there are certainly members of the peerage community who embody that, most of us didn't want to be saddled with that reputation.
No.
And so we intentionally sought to change that. There's the Ask a Peer initiative, which is headed by Suraroku. Obviously, all of the guilds are seeking to expand what peerage means and who can participate in it. And then, the knights from this area are seeking to step up our game. And we do that by keeping each other accountable in a way that, again, to my knowledge, has never been done before. Maybe in Amtgard. Like I said, I've never been to a Circle of Knights meeting. I want to go. Hit me up.
Hit me up. At me at
peer
at peer.
Yeah. But it's possible that the Circle of Knights for each individual kingdom does that. Again, I don't know. But for Belegarth, in a way that question's never been asked before, and it's being addressed, I think, superbly, if I do say so myself. And I don't just say that because I'm a part of that. I watch the great work my fellow knights are doing, the great work that the War Masters are doing. Again, they're opening up peerage to a group of people that never had that opportunity before,
right.
except by possible coercion in the form of Makoots.
You're coming with us whether you like it or not.
Like it or not. And so peerage has changed. I would say is changing, but it has changed.
Yeah.
A lot in the last 5 years. And there are new titles and new forms of recognition. And as a sport, people are looking at what it means differently, especially as our region, we really, really are. And the guilds were neat because they were a sport-wide initiative. They actually didn't start in the West. They got started in Illinois as the main focus, and it got a lot of traction early. I don't think they've gotten out to everybody just because it's hard.
Very much so.
Knights are kind of not only are they iconic in phone games and stick games, but they're also iconic in popular culture where guild masters aren't necessarily.
Right.
So they have a little bit of an uphill battle, but share this podcast with #BuildTheGuilds.
#BuildTheGuilds.
And we'll move going forward. Yeah. So that's what peers do now. we're trying to get away from that kind of being seen as circle jerky and stuffy and above other people. We really are community servants. We really do love this organization and our sister and brother and cousin organizations that do medieval stuff and fantasy stuff. We love Amtgard. Mm-hmm. We love Darkon.
Yeah.
Like Rem said, it's the movie that got him into sword fighting. We love DAG.
I love the SCA.
We love the SCA. We want those we like the little uphill LARPs. Like we love Nero. We love Dystopia Rising. We love all that stuff.
Yeah.
And we want to see all of them grow and grow joyously and happily, and not have some of the same struggles we've had. So, so that's what peers are supposed to be, or at least my take on what peers are supposed to be, and it's what we're hopefully bringing to a Wacky Bats contest near you.
Yep.
and I think at least my closing remark, and then I'll let Rem share his feelings at the end of it, is never be afraid to talk to someone who's got a level of peerage about anything. While the guild masters aren't necessarily the best combatants in the world, they can get you to somebody who can. And while the knights may not and war masters may not necessarily be the best craftsmen, we know who are. And so we've built a community for ourselves, which we want you to be a part of. If you're listening to this and you're not a squire and you're not an apprentice and you don't want to be, you just needed your sword fighting fix and this is what you landed on. We want you as well. Like, we exist to help you, to serve you. And so don't ever be afraid to approach one of us. Some of us look surly, and a couple of us might even smell bad. But we're really here for you. And we want you to be a part, to grow. We want Belegarth, DAG, Amtgard, Darkon, SCA, Nero, all those games to grow and grow well. And we want to help do it.
Yeah.
We want to be there for you. So.
For sure. Thank you, Par. So I echo a lot of Sir Par's points, essentially, but my big thing I want to take home for anyone who is listening, and thank you for listening for this long, I appreciate it, is that I love Belegarth. It took me at a time when I was really down on myself. It took me at a time where I was feeling not the best, and it gave me something to pursue. It gave me goals. It gave me new abilities and skills that I never ever thought I would ever do. I got to meet some of the most wonderful people that I now get to know and feel thankful for in my life. And as a peer, my whole idea on this process that brought me to this point of attaining a title in a game that doesn't mean anything, is that I want to give back to the community. And I think everyone at their core, when it comes to Belegarth, SCA, Dagger here, Nero, Amtgard, wants to give back to the community in ways that they can. So I just want anyone who is listening, go for the goal. Like, just dream big. What do you want to see change? Start it. Implement it. Be that passion. Be that change. I know it's a tired, cliched thing to say, but you know what? Like, I had to stand in front of a bunch of people who were much more my senior, much more tenured, much more educated than I am, much more prolific and prowessed, but I still felt it very important to say something hard that I felt like we all needed to hear, which was that I think we don't have a purpose. I don't think we have a path. Let's find it. Let's find it together, more importantly. So, if you have a great idea or goal, just go for it. If you want to be a part of this podcast with me and you want to talk about something super cool, hit me up. If you want to talk about sword fighting and history, Par is a great resource for that. So
at me.
Add him hard, and hashtag build the guilds.
And I think as Rem was talking, he said, if you have this passion, if you have this goal, here's my saying. If you don't have any of those things and you're just spinning in circles, you can still talk to us.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Of course. Please.
We can help. One of my great joys as a knight in this organization is helping people who just throw their hands up and they're like, I'm brand new, I don't know what to do.
Right.
And I've said it, I'm a history professor. I teach at Boise State University. I deal with mostly university freshmen and sophomores who don't have a direction in their life or who are challenging or questioning the direction in their lives. Peers have a great joy in helping you find your passion, find your path. If you don't know what you want to do, that's great. We can still help you. Just you don't. I just didn't want anybody to be out there like, oh, I've got to have an idea before I go somewhere. No, if you don't have any ideas, come at us.
Yeah.
Or on the field, come at us.
Yeah. We'll do both.
Yeah, we're happy to sit down with anybody who wants to talk. Again, you can be a part of this podcast. You can be a part of a growing future, and at the best time ever for live action role play games. We're on TV. We're in movies. It's finally not super
This is our
weird.
time.
Yeah, this is our time. Rally up, kids. We're going. So thanks to all the old people who had to fight through society crapping on them the whole time. But now's the time. We're finally not a bunch of weirdos. Well, I mean, we are, but
we're owning it, and people are okay with it.
So. Yeah, people are okay with it. We're a bunch of weirdos. So, thanks for giving us your time. As Rem said, I appreciate your listening.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for listening in. We should be doing a podcast every 2 weeks or so with a different speaker on a different topic. If this is something you're interested in to be a part of, please hit me up on Facebook, Shane Rem Delavan. You can find me there. Feel free to throw me a Facebook message there. But we're going to keep going with this, and I think this is a great outlet for communication in our sport. And otherwise, I hope you all have a fantastic day, and we'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time.